All right, so I have 11 o'clock on my computer right now. So just good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today? And I have Pam on the call with me today. So I know that everybody knows me by now. I've been here since September. Was at a previous research institution to that. And then on the call today, we've got Pam. Pam, if you want to introduce yourself.
I have the hiccups. Perfect timing, right? Good morning, everyone. I think I know everyone on the call, but I'm the 4-H agent in Natchez, and I've been the agent here for 3.5 years. So good to talk to everyone today.
So just a little bit overview about the Lunch and Learn. So the Lunch and Learn started last month, and it's going to run until September, the summer series. Each month we're going to meet and have about an hour where we discuss a topic on volunteer development, have about half presentation, half discussion, and don't anticipate that ratio being perfect every time we meet, but these are the topics that have been suggested through this survey and from agent feedback. And so I'm hoping that over the course of the summer, we learn a little bit more about our volunteer development programs, and then we also learn some strategies to be much more effective. And so if you missed the last session, we do have a recording of that. We have materials available, and I can drop that in the chat.
See kind of what you're allowing them.
Somebody, all right. And you got that one, Lindsay. And then Lindsay's going to help me with the chat today and mic muting as well, or help us, I should say. Moving on, July topic, we're going to talk about capturing volunteer impact. And then in August, we're going to move on to talking about strategies for effective volunteer utilization. So because every time we meet, I'm going to talk about ISOCHR. So just a quick overview of our ISOCHR method for effective volunteer management. So this is a long history of success, and we use it in 4-H. It allows you to just kind of with a little bit of strategy and planning to just implement an effective volunteer management program within your 4-H program. And so quick overview within identification. So have we assessed the needs that we have for volunteers in our program? Have we identified any of the desired skills that we need for our program, and then the specific volunteers that we may need for those roles? And then moving into selection, so we're talking about how we're recruiting those volunteers and how we're doing the matching, effectively matching our volunteer base to the positions that we need. I know if you've heard me talk about ISOCHR before, you know that I've identified some areas or potentially maybe some gaps that I like to kind of hone in on. And so that's why we've kind of pulled recruitment out today, because I think that some of our parish programs, there might be it may be a little bit more difficult than others when it comes to volunteer recruitment. Also, as our programs kind of change and become more unique, and then we have other potential, I guess, competition even in our depending on where we are in our program. Recruitment becomes a little bit more difficult sometimes, and we have to be a little bit more strategic. So we're going to talk specifically about that recruitment today. Also moving into orientation. So we have some of our agents on the call that have been really effective at using orientation as a way of recruiting volunteers. And so we'll hopefully talk a little bit about that. So also we know that over 50% of our volunteers roughly have been involved in 4-H before, in the past. And so that has made that orientation just a little bit more easier. They understand 4-H and the benefits that it provides our youth and the life skills it teaches. And so they already believe in the mission, and I think that's very important. And then our training, so providing our volunteers with the skills and the knowledge that they need in performing those roles, and then potentially future leadership roles as well. And then when we move into utilization, which we're going to talk about in a future session, but we're removing those barriers for our volunteers to lead, and then are we providing them with those resources, that structure, and that support to do their job effectively. And then within recognition, and that's one of the many reasons that Pam's kind of assisting today, is using that, recognizing our volunteers consistently, and then using that volunteer recognition as an opportunity for recruitment as well. And so Pam's been very effective in creating this very positive culture of volunteering within her parish. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that she's been effective in recognizing her volunteers. And so she will, touch on a lot of those strategies today. And then lastly, within evaluation, and I know when we talk about evaluation, we often talk about it as us evaluating our volunteers. And I think that's fine, but also when it comes to empowering your volunteers and making them feel like they have that leadership role and a voice at the table, you also need to think about evaluation where they're getting a chance to provide feedback and evaluate your program as well. So next, I want to talk about a little bit about this volunteer life cycle. And so the one thing about the ISOCHR method that I don't like people to look at their volunteer programs as something that's just linear, okay? So, we recruit our volunteers recruit. It's an ongoing, and that relationship is ongoing. And so if you're on this call today, and many of our agents have voiced, just having difficulties with recruitment, and I understand, but if you are, having like strategically recruiting every year and just having trouble getting the volunteers that you need, even though that you're putting a lot of energy into your volunteer recruitment, think about the other areas of the volunteer life cycle that you might not be putting enough energy into as well. And so, yes, recruiting is absolutely important, but are you, doing a good job selecting those volunteers, orienting those volunteers, and managing those volunteer experiences? And I think that if we're not doing a great job managing those volunteer experiences, then it does get a little bit difficult with recruitment. And I know many of the agents can attest to this, and Pam can, that volunteers talk to each other. And so if they don't feel like, and we talked about this on the last call, that there's trust, that they feel like they're making a difference, that those relationships, if you're not communicating with them well, or collaborating with them well, or recognizing them and managing their volunteer experience, then the recruitment becomes very difficult. And so if you are employing some pretty effective strategies in recruitment and you're not getting the results, doing a little bit of a reflection on how you're managing that volunteer experience, and maybe, employing some different strategies there. So one thing that I wanted to touch on before we get started. And then with our agenda, so we're going to talk first about what motivates people to volunteer, because I think that's important. If we're going to be recruiting them, we have to know why it is they're coming to us and volunteering in the first place. Talk about preparing for recruitment, so that's very important. And then setting up those ongoing recruitment initiatives, some potential strategies for volunteer recruitment, and then moving into asking some of our experts on the call, like a couple of people that I've already identified. Obviously, that's where Pam's going to kind of come in heavy with some of the strategies she's done as well. And then moving on into some volunteer recruitment resources. So as we know, volunteers are essential for our programs. We need them in order to grow our reach and then, grow our programs. And so in order to deliver quality 4-H programs, we really need to empower and employ a very large volunteer base. And so I know, as a 4-H agents, we become volunteer managers, and I know that's a difficult role. I had to run an office that was the same way. It was all volunteer driven, and all of our programs are run by volunteers, and they had diverse skills and the diverse demographics. And that can be a very challenging thing to do, absolutely. But it is essential part of our job, and we need to constantly revisit some of the strategies that we have that we employ in developing our volunteers and our programs. So we're here today because we understand it's essential, it's important, recruitment is important, and then recruiting those skills with those diverse needs, or those diverse skills, is also vitally important to our programs. So first, we're going to have a little quick discussion about why people volunteer with Louisiana 4-H. So Pam and I have a Menti survey app. If you go to your menti.com and enter the code on your screen, tell us why you think or why you know that people volunteer with Louisiana 4-H. So why are they volunteering with us? And I'll share this in the chat as well. So why do people volunteer with Louisiana 4-H? So in order to recruit, we need to understand the motivation. So why are they volunteering with us? Okay. So forgive me, my internet's going a little slow today. But so what we've got: enjoy teaching our youth, supporting our kids, former 4-H'er. And so we've seen that some of the survey that we sent out earlier this year, we had over 50% of our volunteers that completed that survey said that they were 4-H members in their youth. To be a part of something, absolutely. To be able to make change in their local community, absolutely, or even within the state. They know the value of our program because they were asked to. Yeah. So there's research that shows that some of the most effective ways of recruiting volunteers is asking them. And I'll say, I don't know if anybody had the chance to participate. I think it was last month. Ryan Akers, who's a former coworker at Mississippi State University, has a disaster preparedness program for youth that he has done really well with. And I was on his CERT team, Campus Community Emergency Response teams, and I was one of his trainers also. And I'll tell you, he recruited me for so many of his programs because he just called my phone and I couldn't say no. And in saying that, I did enjoy the work, but I think that's where he was the most effective in getting his programs off the ground. He just would reach out to you directly and ask you, can you help? So yes, asking because they were asked is one of the many reasons that people volunteer with our programs. It's a great organization. They were alumni. So a lot of the same kind of reasons that we know are the reasons that our volunteers have also said that they volunteer with us. And so let me share with you a couple things. And like I said, I think my internet's just going a little slowly today, so bear with me here. All right, so there's a study that was done, a rather large study on reasons 4-H leaders volunteer. And so these are the same, and I'll show you what our volunteers have said as well, but like helping individuals, like helping people and mentoring youth, gaining that additional experience. And what we've seen through our own surveys is that our volunteers are benefiting from their volunteer roles as well in developing some essential leadership skills, especially when it comes to communication and then teaching youth. Their children were involved. They were asked to, just that personal satisfaction of service. I used to have this little graphic that I presented a lot of the volunteer trainings I did that was, when volunteered got way happier. And so it was just a fun way of saying, like, I really haven't had a volunteer opportunity recently that I haven't at least enjoyed in some way. So I do think that volunteering is an effective way of like reducing stress and just having, feeling good about something too. So understanding why it is our volunteers come to us, and then how you can articulate those benefits to them when you're recruiting. I think we got a little back noise. Hold on one second. All right. And then, and earlier in this year, we sent out a volunteer engagement survey that asks individuals why they became involved in 4-H as a volunteer. It was many of the same reasons, so that somebody asked me to help. It provided a unique opportunity for my kids. I was recruited by another volunteer, and it provided an opportunity for me to give back and serve. And I'm gonna now just look to Pam for a second. Pam, so I know that you've been very effective at recruiting potential school teachers for your 4-H program. What are some of the ways or the benefits that you articulate to them to have them volunteer with your program?
Well, most of the teachers that we recruit were either former 4-H members or their children are involved, or it's just teachers that really like to be busy and go the extra mile. And so, I mean, the benefits are just numerous, as you all know. These people really typically like to work with kids and they like to see the growth. And so I really try to make them a part of all the experience, not just being like a school leader, but inviting them to community events, inviting those leaders to bring their clubs or members from their clubs to do things in the community, to do services. We partner with the city of Natchez a lot, and we partner with their beautification committee, and sometimes the leaders bring their kids and we plant tulip bulbs or we plant different kinds of flowers, and those leaders recruit parents to come in to volunteer to help us because we plant thousands and thousands of flowers each year at the greenhouses, and those leaders just get to experience something besides classroom work with those kids. They get to work beside those kids. They get to develop those relationships and get to have fun with those kids in an environment that's just not school. And so because of that, their rapport with the kids at school increases, and the rapport with the parents increase, because you know they're not just doing schoolwork, they're doing things that will benefit in life other than schoolwork. And so it's just a different kind of environment when teachers work alongside the kids. We invite them to bring their students to the farmers market, and they get to work, learn how to run a business. They learn about growing vegetables and the benefits of eating fresh fruits and vegetables. So the teachers really benefit in ways other than just being a classroom teacher to those students. They get to have different experiences, and in turn, that strengthens the relationship in the classroom. So it makes those kids want to perform more for that particular teacher. That's what I found.
And that's great. And you touched on two things you touched on many things, but you also said people that like to be busy. And sometimes, and I think it was Dr. Fox that said this recently, but if you want something done, ask somebody that's busy. You know, there are those people with that personality that just really like to be involved and have stuff to do. And Pam, you're one of those people. And so I think that's also where you can be effective in recruiting those individuals, because you understand what makes them tick and how they work. And then also one thing that was touched on in our engagement survey is 4-H provides a unique opportunity for youth that sometimes, you know, some of our schools don't always offer. Like, so in saying that, like for me, for example, there's a lot of sports that my kids can do, but you know, I'm looking for something else beyond that also. So like 4-H provided that. And then for individuals that maybe don't want to be involved in sports with their kids, 4-H is an opportunity for them to be involved in something different. And so that's some of the benefits that I think that you've touched on and you've been able to effectively articulate when you're recruiting. So appreciate you sharing that.
And Megan, one other thing I wanted to say is that oftentimes, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but oftentimes school leaders recruit volunteers for me because they have a connection that I may not have. If we are doing a project with the city or at the farmers market, then those school leaders are inviting the parents, and then those parents in turn see what we're doing and they fall in love with 4-H and they want to volunteer and help. So that just brings in a whole new set of volunteers because of the school leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's being able to, so you have a strong culture, right? Your volunteers enjoy volunteering, and then they become these very big ambassadors for your program and then help you recruit. And we're going to touch on that some more too, a little bit further when we talk about our social capital, which I love to talk about. So appreciate you mentioning that. So before we jump into more about like recruitment strategies, before you recruit, before you're talking with potential volunteers, it's important to know why you need them, what skills you need from them, what's expected of them, what resources you can provide them along the way to do it is what they're going to do, and then how much time they need to serve, especially if they're busy. They want just a general like schedule of how their volunteer experience is going to go. And so if what does this sound like? Somebody want to share? What are you starting to think about? Anybody? So if you're involved in any of our new agent trainings, recently we talk about clear positions. Oh, somebody's talking. Charles?
I mean, truly is strategic planning.
It is strategic planning. Absolutely. It is.
Identify where your greatest need is and then try to fill that first.
Absolutely. So having some type of a volunteer strategic plan, and then also developing these position descriptions. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. So if we're not just jumping in with 2 feet just yet. We're really like thinking about what it is that we need, jotting this down into some sort of a, strategic plan that we've created, and then developing these clear position descriptions. So that's very important. We're not going to jump into position descriptions, obviously today so much, but if that's something that we need to talk about in a future call, we'll absolutely do it. But we want to make sure that that's very clear.
Megan, Caitlin Lucas also said making sure you have what skills are needed for the job and volunteer training and screenings.
Absolutely. And those are, and Caitlin has had some kind of one-on-ones lately, so she knows all about this, but in our ISO method, it talks about having, making sure we're doing our screening, making sure we're doing our training and our effective onboarding. So yes, we're recruiting volunteers, but we have to make sure we follow the process and onboarding them the right way. So thank you so much. A job description. Thank you, Lindsay. That's exactly what we're pointing at. Awesome. Great.
Megan, I also wanted to say, Caitlin said, make sure you have the skills that are needed for the job. We also want to make sure that our volunteer has those skills that we need for that specific volunteer position, because we want to set them up for success. If they have a terrible first experience, they're not going to volunteer again, more than likely. So we want to make sure they're equipped. I'm thinking of 4-HU training. I wouldn't ask a volunteer that didn't have good interview skills or communication skills to help train my career prep team, but that volunteer may have skills in a different area. So let's just remember to set them up for success.
Absolutely. And I think that I was over visiting Karen one day, and she was talking about how she wouldn't have some of her, she's got some volunteers that could be at the front of, like engaging with individuals and, being bubbly and having big personality, but then she's got others that like to stay in the back and make coffee, and that's fine. So it's that kind of square peg in a round hole concept, you trying to make sure that you're doing that matching effectively. And so it's absolutely very, very important. So thank you for mentioning that also. And so when we're, moving on for talking about being successful with our volunteer recruitment, and Pam and I talked about this yesterday, but just having that like positive attitude. So why you're recruiting, showing them the value of that opportunity, the challenges that being very clear, the challenges that they will have. So maybe, if it's not a well-resourced organization, so budgets are tight, you can't we have to be creative in the way that we make this work. Review the training options, making sure that we're doing our onboarding that's required, and then providing them with that schedule, but also being friendly and sincere and having that positive attitude. And I think that's really important, and Pam can attest to this. So if you're in a leadership role and people are going to emulate like what it is that you're doing, and so if you're excited about that opportunity, they're going to be excited too. And I know that seems like, common knowledge, but I don't know if it is all the time. Okay. So you want to touch on that, Pam, you can. But
no, I mean, I just agree with you. I think that we should, strive to be positive and enthusiastic about what we're doing and what we're asking the volunteer to do. Because like you said, if we're, bummed out about it or negative, then that's going to bleed off onto the volunteer. So just try to be enthusiastic and positive, even, not in a fake manner, but you know what I'm saying. Just try to bring some energy to the table, and chances are your volunteer will pick up on that and emulate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ladies, Miss Lynette just added, as volunteers learn and develop skills, we need to keep in mind reassessing volunteer roles so that they can recruit within the current volunteer pool.
Yeah, and that's such an important point. And I don't know if we do that, enough. And so that's another reason why, Pam's on this call with me today, but like really revisiting your volunteer program it's not just something that we set up and we leave it alone. And I know last month we talked about like communication and collaboration and trust, but it's also like revisiting the roles that you have your volunteers in, and then also those new positions that you need volunteers to fill. So it's like constant work. Like I said, we're volunteer managers. So I appreciate that. And then Charles has something here. If it is a new volunteer, interview the volunteer to get to know the individual, their experiences, hobbies, etc., so that you can better place the volunteer to have success. And so that's important for many reasons. One, developing that personal relationship with your volunteers. So moving into looking at our less about managing our volunteers, but managing their experiences and then collaborating them, building effective partnerships and relationships. And so that starts with getting to know that individual and what they can provide your organization. There might be something outside of their volunteer enrollment form where they can help, where they can provide a benefit to your organization. I think that's very, very important, Charles. And so I appreciate you sharing that also. So we're going to talk about moving on and talking about recruitment, those strategies for recruitment. And so one thing that I like to talk about a lot is this idea of social capital. And so who wants to explain to me what social capital means? Anybody? Victoria, do you want to take a stab at it? Or Caitlin, somebody?
I think if you think about the word social, we're meaning people, and then if we think about capital, we're resources. So a very simple way of looking at it is getting people resources and attracting people so that they can share their talents and skills.
Absolutely, perfect definition of social capital. And so thinking about the connections that you have, and that goes beyond just your immediate connections. And Pam touched on this earlier, your volunteers also have connections. So if you've found the right mix of volunteers and you've done a great job managing those relationships, they can become ambassadors and recruiters for you as well. And so I think that's where many of us have become effective in our recruitment, and Pam is one of those individuals where she's been able to rely on those connections of her volunteers to increase her volunteer base. And I think that's very important. So not just about your immediate connections, but those that you're connected with.
I think that's important, Megan, because people, like, if they get to volunteer with their friends, you might have more, and if they're involved in other volunteer groups, like, it just brings them in, but you might not have any other connection. But if you don't bring it up, there's no way to know.
And that, Pam, I don't know if you're saying something, but you're on mute right now. I just want to let you know.
I was just agreeing. I was just shaking my head in agreement.
So if you can get in the right organizations and the right connections, you can really benefit you tremendously. So yes, I agree.
Mr. Charles added that network of an individual multiplied by their networks contributing to the success of your organization.
Yes, very good, Charles. So lots of good sharing in the chat today. Thank you so much. So that is very good.
One
All
thing
right.
I also wanted to add, Megan, is that I don't live in the community or the parish that I work in. So relying on my connections in this parish and their connections has been vital for me to be successful in this parish, because when I first started here, I knew a few people, and as the years have gone on, you know, of course, I've gotten more of connected for myself. But at first, especially, I was relying on connections of people that I, you know, knew, which was not very many. So I feel like I've, you know, broadened my network in this parish just by relying on those connections of, you know, of people that I knew. So that's really beneficial. For example, I had a club leader. We were looking for funding. One of my club leaders set me up with the Cane River Water Commission. And because she had a connection, I was able to go in and speak to the commission, and they funded us $6,000. But it wasn't a connection that I had personally. It was my leader's connection. So.
No, that's very good. Yeah. I guess I didn't realize that's even made it where you've had to be more strategic. So that's very good to share. And you've been able to get it done. Awesome. All right. And so we do have another Menti survey up. So if you want to go to menti.com, and then you can enter the code on your screen. And then, so just starting to kind of brainstorm how you can use your social, professional, community connections to help you recruit volunteers. So think about those personal connections, professional connections, maybe community connections that could help you with your volunteer recruitment. I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. So the code's still on the top of your screen. So go to menti.com, use code 379826. Personal, professional, community connections. So just 4 responses, and I know there's 3 options when you enter that. So it takes a little bit of time to load. So we've got friends, local government, business owners, my coworkers, my parents, my spouse, all say that my husband volunteers for nearly everything that I've advisory committees, other youth serving organizations, absolutely. Community organizations, so Rotary is a great one, and they often are looking for guest speakers. Lions Club as well. The one that was a program really that heavily supported me and my youth. Our families, our friends, the parent clubs that we're involved in. Business owners. So somebody that entered business owners wants to maybe share how those business owners have been effective in helping them recruit volunteers.
Megan, it's Lola. I'm the one that wrote that. And just in, where you do personal business, you know, you have a relationship with those people and you just they ask what you do and, you start talking and the next thing you know, well, for me, the next thing I know, I'm like assessing what kind of talents they have and where they might be beneficial or useful to our programming here in Caddo. And so, over the course of time, I've recruited folks to come in, like the builder of my home. His wife is now on our advisory board. And so it's just those little things like that. That's where I was going with that.
No, it's great. Years ago, I was involved in a summer, let's say this summer, but a program that we created for youth in our community. We partner with the local Boys and Girls Club, and we had a local bank that came out nearly every week and provided financial literacy training. And so we had to work with them, obviously, to make sure they could adapt that curriculum for that to target those youth. But it was really, really effective. And they also had a specific community outreach component that they had to meet. And so it was a great partnership. They needed, to go out in the community and provide this, training or professional development. And then we needed these individuals and their experience for that program. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right, I'm gonna go back here. Great. Okay, so we're moving on. We're going to talk a little bit about the volunteer audiences that we should consider when recruiting volunteers. And so when we're thinking about the roles that we have open or the skills that we need, there's many different audiences to consider. And some of these might not be the ones that you always look to, but they might be somewhere that you could, start looking. So like your local Chamber of Commerce, your Rotary, any parent or teacher organizations, which I know Pam is heavily involved in, potential church groups. If you've got a college or university in your town, many of those programs will have service learning centers, community engagement centers, or even volunteer centers where you can get something posted. And so that there's opportunities there as well in engaging some of those older college students. If you've got some kind of ongoing opportunities where you need volunteers consistently, so you've got a lot of fraternity and sororities on college campuses, they need service hours. It's a requirement. They will have a philanthropy or a local philanthropy that they'll have to identify and serve, provide service towards. So there's also an opportunity there as well. And then you've got animal educators that sometimes we don't always reach out to. And then you've got other youth organizations and community partners and community groups that you can reach out to. And Pam, if you've got any to add to this as well.
I think that covers it, Megan. I mean, honestly, everyone's my audience.
Exactly. Exactly.
I can meet someone. We work at the farmers market every Saturday, and if someone comes up to our table and we start talking about 4-H, and before COVID, when the kids were working at the farmers market too, they would always be so complimentary of the program and the job that the kids are doing. And so I would just strike up a conversation, and by the end of the conversation, typically I would have another volunteer because they really liked what they were seeing, and people want to be a part of something positive. Mm-hmm. And so when they see good things, if they just want to be a part of that. So it's real easy to recruit during an event. We do that a lot. We have a lot of events, and I recruit everywhere I go because it's just it's just what I do.
one thing too is some of your government organizations or civil servants have an outreach component of their role, and so we constantly would get our police officers and our firefighters would come out all the time, nearly anytime we asked, and talk to our youth as well. And so some of those too may have opportunities to be more involved, and I've seen that in looking at some of the volunteers, except for example for Hall of Fame. So many of them had been either served in government or had some type of political office as well. So those are ones you could consider reaching out to. And then what I find is a lot of your individuals that are involved in other organizations, community organizations and nonprofits, are ones that are still looking for opportunities. So I feel like in the South, it's almost like this unwritten rule, like you retire and then you go on and volunteer in some way. And that's at least what I've seen. And so you've got a retired Louisiana Retired Teachers Association that's got a website. You've got your local United Way chapters will also have a website where they're looking, or they host volunteer opportunities that are available. And so getting connected with those organizations so that you can have a listing, and then if they have events where you can go out, set up a table and just talk about the opportunities that you have to volunteer. And maybe you're not always recruiting volunteers, but you might be potentially recruiting guest speakers or learn about other resources that you could tap into in your community as well. So I think that's
and Megan, I wanted to add that let's not forget that our 4-Hers parents is a great volunteer audience. Last year, when I sent enrollment cards home, I also sent home the volunteer enrollment card with the kids, and I was able to recruit a lot of volunteers through those volunteer enrollment cards that I sent home with the students. It has a place where they put their interest and what they're actually interested in volunteering for. Some wanted to just volunteer at the school level, which was great, but some also were interested in volunteering on the parish level. So that was very helpful for me. And last year was the first year that I actually sent those volunteer enrollment cards home with every potential 4-H member.
And I think that's important because it moves on to these ongoing recruitment initiatives and how that's important. So we don't just recruit at one time of the year, but we're doing it kind of consistently throughout. So put yourselves in a volunteer's shoes. So is your webpage set up where they can find information? Do you have, are you adding some, when you send out these member enrollment cards, are you adding something about, volunteering and using those to recruit your volunteers, like Pam said? You could even cycle out some social media recruitment materials. You could, post them continuously or use those Facebook scheduling tools so they go out automatically. Not saying that that's your only way of recruiting volunteers, but to get information out continuously, it can be effective. And then understand that connecting with volunteers there's multiple ways of doing it. So telephone calls, emails, social media, flyers, but then having those one-on-one interactions. And then those also with those parent meetings and parent orientations, and that we're hopefully going to talk to Charles about a little later also. And then connecting with those local agencies continuously. So anytime that there's an opportunity for you to set up a booth or a table to talk about 4-H and the opportunities to get involved in any community event, take advantage of that, because potentially it could be an opportunity to recruit new volunteers for your program. And then this slide's got a lot on it, so that's why you can download these slides, and I'll make them available to you so you can see. But there's a lot of strategies for recruiting volunteers that you could use and employ. So that volunteer referral section on your enrollment forms, or stapling something about, do you know anybody that would like to volunteer? Here's the opportunities that we have, and then adding some contact information, connecting with the local schools to send out recruitment flyers. So one way that we're really effective is we had a pretty good relationship with our local schools. So anytime we had we needed a volunteer, we sent a flyer home with nearly every child. And I don't know if our parish programs have the printing capacity for that, but it was just, we'd print them like 6 to a page, cut them up, and then get them in the backpack of every youth going home. And that was very effective. Having that ongoing recruitment listings, if you have volunteer centers or community organizations that provide volunteer services locally, having those parent meetings where maybe you were talking about the 4-H program, but you specifically carve out time to talk about volunteering with 4-H, having those onboarding materials at hand. And Pam also mentioned having this volunteer, these leaders that actually serve somewhat as, and this may be a formal role or an informal role, but they're going out and specifically recruiting volunteers for your program. They become those ambassadors for you. And that can really, I think, be effective if you've got a really strong culture where people really want to be involved in your program. And then we move into these ongoing social media campaigns, connecting with these colleges and universities in the area to see what opportunities for service learning or community engagement where you could be having either employees or students out serving with you. Writing letters to the local newspaper could be effective. Posting flyers to at least get some information out within public locations. And then this other idea that we want to visit is holding this annual recruitment event. So traditional annual fundraiser that you have every year, having a volunteer recruitment event as well could be something that you could consider, where you can have your, parents, members kind of collaborate in recruiting volunteers for your program. So just some ideas that you can visit or think about. And so we've got, I guess, 14 minutes left. So if you want to just take a moment, how have you been successful recruiting volunteers for your program? And just do this quite quickly, and then we're going to talk to Pam, and then we're going to talk to Charles about some things that they've done in their program. So we're got some sharing so far, just a little bit, but we're getting some more in. The code's still on the top of your screen, 379826. So we've got parents and grandparents of 4-H members, just asking, recognition and recruitment. Yes, absolutely. Help for retainment. So if you're, recognizing your volunteers regularly, communicating with them, collaborating them, that helps with retention. That also makes recruitment much easier. So, and then some not very, I've used volunteers for a few events. Oh, that one went away. Held to side as other tasks and priority. Okay, yeah, exactly. I mean, we are busy, and so it does, volunteer recruitments can be really, really hard, I understand. And so that's why it's important to just carve out time to work on your volunteer program constantly and consistently. And then the simply just asking, networking, visiting with people, parents, alumni, community partners, business. You're always kind of in that role of recruiting volunteers. And then parents of 4-H members, former 4-Hers, putting a call out to volunteers in newsletter, asking them in person. So a lot of great ideas we're sharing about how you've been successful recruiting. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit, spend a few more moments with Pam talking about her parish program. And so I put your network is your net worth, and I thought that was kind of already relevant for just Pam and the career path that she's had. And then the relationships that she's developed with her volunteers and this very strong culture that she has. And she can talk a little bit more about that. But and then I was also at a leaders training that she hosted, and you see like they're having a great time there. This picture doesn't do it justice, but that she had people in all of the tables and it was just packed. And so that was, just another a way of showing how strong her volunteer program is, when she hosted this during the day and people were really, really wanting to be there. So Pam, if you want to talk a little bit more about how you've been effective with your volunteer recruitment for your program.
I think the thing that I'm most effective with is that I see everyone that I come in contact with as a potential volunteer. I think that if you get that mindset and just, I mean, every time I meet someone, I'm thinking, okay, how can they fit into my program? I try to take time to learn something about that person to see where they might fit in. But if you just always are on the lookout for a volunteer and have in the back of your mind what you need a volunteer for, then I think it makes it easier. And after I'm able to get those volunteers, I do try to recognize those volunteers formally and informally. And I also try to develop a personal relationship with those volunteers because, you know, like I said, I'm not from this community, so I really rely on my volunteers to set me up or to put me in contact with different people. So, you know, just developing those relationships is so important to the success of my program. I don't know, I just think that we should, or for me personally, it's just important for me to invest my time and energy in and just maintaining those relationships with those volunteers and letting them know my expectations and rewarding them or just patting them on the back if they deserve it, and just making them feel like they're important, and to always, if I ask a volunteer to volunteer for something, to always use that person, because people don't like to show up and really just to be there. They want to be used. And so I feel like if we, you know, strive to use our people and put them in the correct position and just keep those communication lines open, then I feel like that's what has been, you know, why my program has been successful so far, because those are the things that I try to do. Does anyone have any specific questions? This picture was of our volunteer leader training. I do, in Natchez, Christmas is a big deal. So at the beginning of the school year, I go face to face and have volunteer training with all of my school leaders. But in December, I make it a big deal. We have a big Christmas party, so-called Christmas party. They come to my office. I treat them to lunch. I have a gift for everyone, door prizes, and we just make it a fun atmosphere. And I present all the information that I need them to know at that training. So they look forward to that, and they know that they're going to be treated well. And so they get really excited about it. And it's just fun for us. And like I said, I give them all the information that they have to know at the beginning of the year, face to face. And then I just make the Christmas social, the training that our yearly training. And so that aids in retention. Seldom do I have a school leader that is not a volunteer again the next year, because I really try to recognize and you know, communicate and develop a relationship with those people, and it just makes retention easier for me. Are there any questions? Does anyone have a specific question that I could answer?
Stephanie said that's a great idea. So she, yeah.
Well, we, Ms. Pam, in Ascension, we usually do an in the beginning of the school year, you know, training, leader training for them. But we used to have a consistent volunteer like banquet, appreciation banquet, and we've done it once or twice. The attendance was okay. It wasn't great. But these last couple years, Camille and I have seriously struggled finding a date to do that in the spring. You know, one year she was on maternity leave. The next year I was on maternity leave. Then in the following year she was on, you know, there was always something that came up that just made it really inconvenient for us to try to find a date. And so this seems like a really cute idea of getting to them before spring gets here. I mean, don't get me wrong, fall and Christmas time is still super busy as well, but this might be a good idea of catching them before the really busy season gets here. This is a cute idea.
Thank you, Stephanie. And it works for us because I was a classroom teacher for 28 years, and in the fall, teachers are slammed. I mean, we can't hardly stand one more piece of information, you know, that we think is unnecessary to getting our classroom started. So whenever I started here, I started in October. So, the beginning of the school year had passed, so I wanted to train my volunteers, and that's why I chose the Christmas time. And the superintendent lets the teachers get out a half a day. I have a lunch ready when they get here, and it's just a very festive occasion, and the teachers are loving it. And plus, I get that information to them that they need. So, you know, because club meetings September is really recruitment. We start meetings October, November. We've just had 2 meetings before my leader training. So if you use some time to do some face-to-face time with your leaders, you can make that work. In December, they need a break by December. They were so excited to get out of the classroom for half a day and come and just be celebrated. You know, it just works for us.
Yeah, I think I like this picture is great, and I've got a bunch more, but let's try to pick out just one specifically. But this was just a great idea and a great concept, and I think what Pam just talked about, like your network is your net worth, and just being well connected, and then using those connections to help you with your recruitment as well, and how important it is to have that strong culture. And I believe Charles is on the call too. And so I wanted to touch on some stuff that I know that they've done in Lafayette. And so I call this one Start Early, Finish Strong. And so if you see this picture of Charles here, he's got, and it doesn't do it justice either, but he had like 30 plus people in this room. And it was packed, like they were lining the walls. And this was a parent orientation. But if you see his picture, it says parent/volunteer orientation. So all of his parents do volunteer orientation for all of his events, and this is his presentation that he's perfected, and you see all those pink forms, so they're filling those out. And at the beginning, he does this early at the beginning of the year, and then I think he's trying to talk, so I'm going to let him touch on this a little bit. But
no, that's fine. Thanks, Megan. We've started several years ago in an effort to try and, we're going to call it onboarding, at every of our major events, because there's so many parents. Some know who we are, but there are some that do not. Their kids involved, but they don't know how to get involved. I mean, and realize, we're probably 1,500 4-Hers, so we're an urban area, so that makes things very different. Each of our events, you may have a different population. So however you can capture and reach a few people each time, even though we may have specific volunteers that we're trying to recruit, those are in addition to these, what we call onboarding sessions at major events. So we may grab another person or 2 or 3. And like you said, there were probably 30 something people in this setting. And this was during officer training, where our junior leader officers are actually conducting the officer training for that office. And we have another volunteer or 2 or 3 in each of those into rooms that are helping them. We figured if we have this captive audience of all these other parents with not a whole lot to do, let's try to orient them on what we are, what we offer, the history of 4-H, who we're tied to, the 3 levels of government, so they understand. And I even talk about early on the school year, how our funding is tied to local government. And if they hear that the LSU Ag Center or County Agent's Office, that our budget may be in jeopardy, feel free to show up at a meeting to give a testimonial of on our behalf. In addition to that, the school board, same thing. We're using a school for this function, and then how we're tied to state government, state legislature, and then USDA on the federal government, because each year, y'all know where we stand with local funding, state funding. This year seems to be a little better, but normally we are in jeopardy each session that starts. And our local government, we come through successful, but initially we're kind of like at the bottom of the barrel when you talk about parish mandates. that the Constitution has to provide for. We have an agreement, but that's not Constitution. So just realize, as much as people know, the better they can help your organization and be supportive of your organization based on the knowledge that you orient them with at each of these events with their own kids. So we found this to be very successful. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I think that's a great idea, Charles, and thank you for that, because I'm going to use that as well.
And I have the PowerPoint. I mean, Megan has it. I know she's already sent this out, but feel free to edit this in any way. And then it kind of goes through an overview of what we are doing in the parish, the organization, and then in the end, we go through and share with the parents what we would consider our major events for the year. So this is conducted in September, October. So at least they have major events before we really started our year off. And those with asterisks, what that means is a registration is required for those events, you know, livestock shows, shooting sports, horse shows, those things, 4-H University camp, but they're parish events that they may not need a registration for. But if they have any questions, our contact information is in the last slide, and then they do get a copy of the presentation before they leave, even though our contact information is on everything they get from us, newsletters, etc. But this may help them, and they write notes on their PowerPoint during the session and then contact us after. So if anyone can find any of this useful or needs it, I'm willing to share it. Megan shared it, but I think that's how we get the word out on, especially with new families that are involved for the first time in our program.
Yeah, and I still have a copy of that PowerPoint. I know I've shared it with some of the new agents, but I'd gladly send it out if y'all want it, or Charles would. But it's, you know, not recreating the wheel, so he's kind of got a framework already together if you want to use it. And then I guess we kind of went a little bit over projected time, but doesn't look like we've lost anybody yet. So I just wanted to share this with you. So the 4H.org has a volunteer marketing resource kit. There's volunteer recruitment flyers that are editable, social media graphics and copy, volunteer recruitment video that you could use, and some, you know, other additional helpful materials. I use some of their volunteer audiences for this presentation, and then they've also got a sample annual recruitment plan that you can kind of work through. And so I'll share this PDF in the chat, so you can go to this and copy that link and download those marketing resources. If you've never been on the 4H.org site, you kind of have to log in to get it, but I'll share that with you as well. And then also just a reminder that we do have the volunteer management plan and the recruitment plan. Those materials, if you want them, I'll provide you with a copy. So if you're working through developing your recruitment plan and what you need, this might be helpful when we're talking about, in the beginning, the strategic plan or making a plan. And then lastly, we do have digital badges for each of these sessions. And so and I would hope that you would spend just a couple of minutes completing that evaluation, and I'll share it in the chat. If you've done any of them before, I really do like to incorporate just some reflective questions. And so if you could please do that for us, we would really appreciate it. I know Pam would probably like the material for her portfolio, and I certainly would like it. And then, like I said, we do have the digital badge as well. So if you can go ahead and, the link there didn't pull up, but I'll share it again. So please do the evaluation. Join us next month. We'll talk a little more about capturing volunteer impact and then volunteer utilization. I know everybody's really busy, so I appreciate you staying a few minutes after with us. If you do have questions and you want to ask them, I'll stay on And if Pam's available, I guess I haven't asked her if she could stay on as well, but I do understand people's schedules. I might limit them. But if you have questions, certainly. Great. And then I'm going to share this link as well, so you have it.
I can stay on. And also, if anybody ever has any questions or need help, or, you know, to know more specifically how I do my volunteer training and some of the things I do and some of the games I've made that I've used pertinent information that I need my leaders to know, but we do it in the form of a game. I'd love to share those things. So just shoot me an email and I'll be glad to help you. But don't shoot me the email until after 4-H, you guys.
And then, like I said, the recordings as well as the previous session materials, I've created a web page for that, and I'll share that also in the chat stream. So if you missed the last month, or if you didn't do the evaluation last month, but you want the digital certificate / digital badge, I can share that. You can still go ahead and do that also. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, we appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, Pam, this is Caitlin. This is probably a silly question, but how early do you send out your invitations to those events? Like, one of the things that I struggle with and I haven't quite figured out yet as a new agent is if we send it too in advance, people forget about it. But if it's not soon enough for them to plan, so what is kind of your guideline on what you set, what your time frames are?
Are you talking specifically for my leader training? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am. Either your leader training or like your or like a bank, like kind of what you and Stephanie were talking about. Because I want to try to do something like maybe a Christmas party or something to recognize those volunteers as well.
So I usually create a really cute invitation and I send that out about 3 weeks ahead of time. I just send it in a mass email and I ask for a confirmation where I'll have numbers for the meal and that kind of thing. And then so I send it out about 3 weeks ahead of time. And then the second 2 weeks before, I send out a reminder or saying, I can't wait to see y'all. And then a week before, I send another something, just like a little hint of some of the fun things that we're going to do. And the day before, I always send out a reminder saying, I can't wait to see you tomorrow. You know, come hungry. We have a great meal planned, and so I usually do about I start about 3 weeks, and you can't do it one time and be done. You have to continue to send out a little, and I try to do it in a fun way, just to give them a hint of what's coming up. So it doesn't sound like I'm nagging. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you, because that's where I always struggle. I don't want to be like, hey, are you coming? Hey, are you coming? But that's a really cute idea to have like a reminder, say, oh, I hope y'all come hungry. Like, I hope to see you. Yeah. So thank you so much. Like, that's the idea, is like that I sometimes don't get as creative as I can be.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it does take some effort, Caitlin, and it takes a little time. But in the end, the end result is what you're looking for. And it's going to be, it's going to save you time and energy in the long run. Like I said, I do cute little gifts for everyone. I may take a picture of the Christmas tree with all the gifts under it and say, Santa came to see you, or, something cute and corny like that, but they love it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And if I can help you with anything else, I have some cute games. I have like a Jeopardy game that I've made, and some of the categories are like Santa Scholarship or Rudolph's Record Books. And I have questions. The questions are information that I need them to know, but we do it in the form of a game. So it's pretty fun. And they get really competitive. I put them into teams. So our parish is not large in number as far as population, but we're large in area. So sometimes the leaders, that's the only time they really see each other, besides like Achievement Day or Awards Banquet or something like that. So it allows them to form relationships too by putting them on teams and playing games together, and they just really enjoy each other's company.
And for those still on the call, just the evaluation tiny link that I created was causing some security issue or whatnot. So I just copied the long one into the chat for you, that the forms.gl, the GLE. So thank you so much for letting me know that. I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
All right, I think we're good. So thank y'all so much. I'm gonna, these are great. Thanks for doing this and incorporating practical experience in the field. I do look at survey data, y'all. So if you suggest something, I'm gonna try to implement it. And so that's one of the suggestions, was just give us a little bit more practical examples from the last presentation. So thank y'all, and thank you, Pam, and then also Charles too. So thank y'all so much for sharing today.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Y'all have a good day. Great day.